Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Justin Nazaroff. I'm the owner of Phoenix Ammunition. And I'm sort of doing this under duress in the sense that I'm not a podcaster, I'm a manufacturer. But I'm also a thinker and an investigator and a bit of an engineer. And I just feel like I can't sit by any longer and let Candace Owens spin a spider web of tales about the Charlie Kirk shooting. Specifically as it relates to the ballistics and her assertion that it could not have been done by a .30-06 rifle. So the purpose of this discussion is to review technical information and data that we actually have available, and in addition, review the information that Candace Owens, her supporters, and many other people that have posted so-called replications of the incident. We're here to review the information that they don't have, that they would absolutely need in order to render a definitive statement on what happened. So let me just start by saying this is a discussion and a review for people who can think critically and have a modicum of intelligence. If you're here thinking that this is going to prove or disprove that a .30-06 rifle was used, then you might as well tune out, because that's not what you're going to get. What you are going to get is an idea of all the information that Candace Owens can't possibly have, and then you can make your own determination on whether you believe anything else that she says. So let's just start there. Candace Owens is not just asking questions, okay? I've been around a long time. I was in high school when 9/11 happened, so I've seen and read and investigated every conspiracy theory that you could possibly imagine. And like many other conspiracies, Candace is not just trying to bring up things for people to think about. She's making statements definitively in one direction or another. And when she gets disproven on any one of those things, she simply goes back to 40 or 50 other things that she says she's just asking questions about. So I'm not going to talk about any of those other things. I'm not going to talk about the maroon shirts or the trapdoors or Israeli planes or any of that nonsense. We're just going to look at the ballistics in question, because that's what I do for a living. So let's just start with some basic facts. We have no idea, beyond the fact that it was a .30-06 cartridge, what actually hit Charlie's neck or at what velocity. So .30-06 is simply a cartridge designation. It can be loaded in a variety of different ways. You can have a light bullet going fast. You can have a heavy bullet going slow. Saying that Charlie Kirk was shot with a .30-06 is like saying that Charlie got run over by a four-door sedan. All right, we don't know if he got run over by a Chevy Volt at 20 miles an hour, or if he got hit by a BMW M5 doing 80 miles an hour. The difference between load data in 30-06 is maybe not that great, but you get what I'm saying. So far as I'm aware, there is no coroner's report, autopsy report, ballistics report, anything of that nature that is telling us any of the information we need in order to calculate the basic physics of the round that hit his neck. So, as you can see on the page below me, I've written out just some basic information that anybody can look up. This is stuff that you could Google in 20 minutes. Certainly, Candace Owens could have done this. So, for example, a 150 grain projectile, that's the actual bullet for those of you who aren't as well versed with the terminology. A 150 grain bullet going around 3,000 feet per second produces 3,800 joules of force. A 200 grain bullet going 2,569 feet per second produces about 4,116 joules. Now, the first problem is that's at muzzle velocity. That's the generally accepted way for ammunition and firearms manufacturers to report data. The problem with muzzle velocity is we don't, so far as I'm aware, and this could probably be calculated based on photos of the evidence, but of course, some of you don't really even think that it was the same rifle that was used. The FBI pictures of the rifle, people don't believe that that was the actual rifle in question. So we don't even know what barrel length the projectile was fired from, which is a piece of information that we would need in order to know the exact muzzle velocity in the first place. Secondly, muzzle velocity is not actually what's important here. What's important is velocity at impact. So depending on what report you read and who you believe, it was something like 120 to 130 yards, 360 feet. I've looked up ballistic tables and rounded down to 100 yards for the simplicity of this discussion. As you can see, even at 100 yards, we're losing somewhere around 15% velocity. You can see that the amount of energy delivered on impact is already starting to come down. You might say, well, okay, sure, but a human neck? Come on, bro. Whether it was 4,000 joules or 3,100 joules, there's just no way that a human neck could stop a projectile going that velocity. And you might be right. The problem is you don't know anything about the projectile, and neither does Candace Owens. And for that matter, neither do I. So again, 30-06 being one of the most popular hunting cartridges possibly in the entire country, maybe not these days due to the invention of various other calibers that are maybe better suited. But there is a huge range of 30-06 cartridges being manufactured in this country by every brand imaginable. Funny enough, it's actually not a cartridge that we manufacture. We've done some special projects. We've done armor-piercing 30-06, actually. In any case, the point is, if you don't know anything about the projectile, you have absolutely no way to estimate what happens when it hits something. So, a standard full metal jacket projectile, like this one here. This is actually pulled out of a 30-06. This is not designed necessarily to deform or fragment on impact. But that doesn't mean that it won't. I have shot a lot of FMJ ammunition into a lot of different objects, and I've seen all kinds of things happen, especially with rifle bullets. Rifle bullets are long and thin, and when they hit things, they tend to deform in like the shape of a banana, if you can imagine. And when that happens, bullets start to tumble, they start to flip end over end, They do all sorts of unpredictable things. However, if I'm going to put myself in the shoes of the Charlie Kirk assassin for a moment, why would I be using an FMJ bullet? There's literally no reason. If I was planning in Minecraft to assassinate a public figure, I would go to the hunting department at Cabela's and I would pick up the box of ammo with the deer on the side. That's a famous Dave Chappelle skit, right? Give me the box with the deer on the side. That's the one that I want. Okay, so let's talk about another type of projectile that could have been used. This is what's called a soft point, right? Tip of the projectile is exposed. You can see the lead core. And what happens is when that hits something, it's going to deform into sort of a mushroom shape. We have a third type of projectile, a hollow point, where we have a cavity drilled or formed or machined into the center. And when that hits something, it's going to unfold. This is not a 30-06 projectile. This is actually a 9mm. But you can see this is what a hollow point does. With a rifle, they operate basically the same way. You might get a little bit more folding on the pedals. It depends on if it's serrated on the side or scored, rather. But this is what happens to a 9mm hollow point projectile fired into 20% FBI ballistics gelatin at 1,000 to 1,100 feet per second out of a 9mm handgun. This is how much it's deformed just by hitting ballistics gel. So what do you think a rifle bullet will do when it hits a non-homogeneous object at potentially somewhere between 2,300 and 2,700 feet per second? It's going to deform. It's going to fragment because that's what they're designed to do. These kinds of projectiles are designed to stay in whatever they hit. That doesn't mean that they always will, of course. This is when I'm going to get a bunch of people saying, but bro, I shot a deer once and I blew the lungs out and the bullet came right out the backside. Yeah, you're right. That happens all the time. I can talk to hundreds of other hunters who have shot all kinds of different animals with hollow point projectiles that stayed in the target. Charlie's neck is not ballistics gelatin, right? The human body is not ballistics gelatin. Ballistics gel is not really an accurate representation of the human body. What it's designed to be is a scientific, repeatable, reproducible standard by which to compare things. So if I'm a manufacturer and I make a certain type of bullet, I want to compare that to a different manufacturer's bullet. And so we use ballistics gel as a uniform standard. The human body is not a uniform standard. Your skin has a different density than muscle tissue. Your muscle tissue has different density and hardness than tendons and ligaments. And certainly human bone has a different density and hardness than muscle tissue and skin. Different bones in the human body have different densities. The density of any individual person's bones is dependent on a wide variety of things. Bone density can vary by 50 to 60%. Charlie was actually at the age where bone density tends to be at its peak. I'm not saying that Charlie had a steel neck. What I am saying is human bones are very dense, and they certainly will cause bullets to deflect and deform because we design bullets to deflect and deform when they hit things, at least with hunting cartridges. So let's look at the anatomy of the human neck for a moment and discuss some other variables that we don't know, that Candace doesn't know, and what some of the people who have come up with these, they call them scientific tests. They're nothing of the sort. Another important factor is what angle, both in pitch and yaw, was the projectile at when it struck him. What I mean by pitch is the angle from the roof to Charlie's neck. Now, that is something that we can estimate with some degree of accuracy. I've seen between 5 degrees and 7 degrees. So that one we can figure out to a degree. The one that I'm not sure about, and because we don't have any photos, is we don't know the yaw angle. What I mean by that is, depending on where on the roof the shooter was laying, depends on whether he hit Charlie's neck directly in the front or at an angle to the side. The reason that that's important is because of the shape of the human vertebrae. This is a sort of a top-down cross-section of a human vertebrae. This is, understand, guys, this is not, I'm not here to be a medical doctor, but what I am trying to show you is that there are a ton of variables in play, and if you don't control for most of them, the data that you're going to get as a result is garbage. So let's assume that Charlie was shot directly in the front, and the bullet hit directly in the front of the vertebrae. You can see that would produce a very different effect than if the bullet was hitting at an angle from the side, or even directly 90 degrees across from that. That's going to change how much bone was struck, how much airspace there was between the bone and the tip of the bullet. Anytime the material in front of the bullet changes, the physics behind the bullet are going to change as well. If you fire a bullet into a hard object and suddenly, as it's passing through, the tip of that bullet hits an empty cavity of space, it's going to change the direction in which the bullet deflects or yaws. If it hits something soft and then all of a sudden hits something hard and then all of a sudden hits something soft, all of those things cause the bullet to deviate in different directions. The downward angle is important because, again, that determines what the bullet's passing through and where it's deflecting as it does so. So this is basically a crudely drawn cross-section of a human neck. The shaded areas are the vertebrae, and the white areas are the discs in between. You've got 7 vertebrae in the human neck. We don't have any kind of an autopsy report saying how many of those vertebrae were hit, which one was hit first, which was hit last. We don't have an autopsy report telling us where the bullet actually came to rest or whether it hit any other bones along the way. Here's what the human body looks like, right? Bullet hits Charlie's neck. It's entirely possible that the bullet was deflected at an angle downward and hit any of the bones below it. Scapula, sternum, any of those things. So unless Candace Owens has autopsy photos and an autopsy report in her possession, which I don't believe she does, there's no way she knows what was actually damaged in his neck. All we know is that the bullet came in. We can figure out mostly where the bullet entered his neck based on the video of him actually being shot. But from there, we have no idea where the bullet traveled. It's entirely possible that the bullet was deflected at an angle downward, struck his scapula, deflected again, struck his sternum, deflected again, and came to rest, somewhere in this area. We have no idea. Again, this is not me trying to prove that it did or didn't happen. What I am here to prove is that Candace doesn't have any of the information needed to make any kind of definitive statement one way or the other. So let's talk about human bone. The reason that all of this matters is human bone has a high degree of variability, both in the density of, for example, your femur, one of the more dense bones in the body. Very different than, say, the hyoid bone in your neck, right? But human vertebrae are pretty durable. Our spine is meant to carry a lot of load. It's meant to survive a fair amount of trauma. So we can say that it's at least average. Let's say that human vertebrae is right in the middle. And let's say that Charlie was average, even though he was a pretty healthy guy. He's 6'5", so his bones are, I'm 5'9". So Charlie's vertebrae are probably larger than mine to a certain percentage. The reason all this matters is because human bones are sort of like a tree, right? If you're trying to chop a log into pieces, you don't hit it from the round side, right? You hit it from the top because the wood fibers are aligned in that direction, and it's very easy to split by hitting it in parallel to the direction of the fibers. Human bones are very similar. So a bullet, if you can imagine a bullet hitting a human bone directly, like if I put a femur bone on this table and I shot it lengthwise, hot dog style, for all you boomers, that's going to be the least amount of resistance. That is where a bone would be easiest to break. Again, like trying to split a round log by hitting it on the top. But if it strikes perpendicular to the collagen fibers, to the grain, if you will, the amount of force required to break it is much higher, up to 10,000 joules. Now, refer back to the data up top. We have a range from 3,100 joules at 100 yards to, say, 3,400 joules. I'm not saying that a human bone could take 3 bullets from a 30-06. If you think that, you're fucking retarded. And again, you should have left this discussion a long time ago because this is not for you. This is for critical thinkers. The point is, human bone is actually quite dense and quite hard. And it absolutely will cause bullets to deflect and deform. And once a bullet deflects and once it deforms, you have absolutely no way to know what will happen. There's a guy that I shoot with competitively that's got a fragment of a 9mm bullet embedded in his thigh because it hit a steel plate at a funny angle, an angle that nobody thought could result in any kind of splashback, but it hit him anyway. I've fired bullets into ballistics gel and watched the first one go right through the middle, and the next one started off in the middle and came out the bottom of the gel or out the side because the bullet deformed slightly differently than the one before. So anybody who says that it's impossible for a 30-06 to be the rifle and the cartridge in question just doesn't know what they're talking about. So I'm sure some of you are going to be saying, well, what about the test that this guy did? What about the test that this Navy SEAL guy did? When I hear things like that, it drives me crazy because I realize how many people have no concept of the scientific method. Firing one bullet into, an animal spine that I got from the butcher and set on a wood table outdoors is not at all an accurate representation of what happened in the Charlie Kirk shooting. It just isn't. First of all, the guy looks like he's standing about 20, 30 feet away from the target. Not at 100 yards. What happens then? Can we at least control for that variable? Can we get somebody out there to set up at 100 yards and shoot a ballistics gel block with a human spine embedded in the middle? Has anybody done that? Has anybody done it at the exact angle of the shot that hit Charlie Kirk, with the exact bullet that hit Charlie Kirk, traveling at the exact velocity that it hit Charlie Kirk? No. So it's all bullshit. It's all just one test that proves absolutely nothing. Go do that test 100 times. Then come back to me with some results, and then maybe we can have an intelligent discussion. But until then, this is just people making YouTube videos to get clicks. And that's fine. We can ask questions. We can look at the data. But it seems obvious now that Candace doesn't have any real interest in answering any of these questions. In fact, I think she wants these questions to be unanswered as long as possible because her grift basically relies on vagueness and the ignorance of your average person who has not fired bullets into a lot of different objects and hasn't shot 100 deer in their life. So I'm not even sure where she plans to go next. Let me answer some other questions. Am I being paid by the Jews? You're fucking retarded. You're fucking retarded. Okay. I was having intellectual discussions with my friends about why I didn't support Israel back in 2008 when I was voting for Ron Paul. Back when they were saying Iran was going to have the bomb in 10 years in 2008. So if you think I'm being paid by Israel or the Jews, you're fucking retarded. Same thing about Qatar or anybody else, right? I'm an American. I was born literally 5 miles away from my shop. I don't plan to go anywhere else, and the rest of the world can fuck off. So if that answers your question, hopefully that answers your question. Am I doing this because I'm sucking off Tim Pool or I'm Tim Pool's buddy? Let me tell you something. I've been on Tim's podcast, 4 or 5 times. In between those events, I literally do not talk to anybody that works for Tim or Tim at all. None of them even have my phone number. So, no, I'm not doing this because I'm buddies with Tim Pool. There's actually plenty of things that I disagree with Tim Pool about, and maybe we can talk about that some other time. Another question I saw in the comments. Bro, you're telling me you trust the FBI's report? No, I don't really trust anything that the FBI says, like most of you. But I don't see any reason why I should trust Candace Owens anymore. She has less information than theoretically the FBI has. So that's just a ridiculous question. I would say the same to you. You trust Candace Owens? Give me a fucking break. Another comment or opinion. Well, what about the guy that said Charlie had a magic neck, that he had a steel spine? Do you believe that? Well, no, but I do believe that people say things to the friends of somebody who was just brutally murdered in front of the world to try to make them feel better. Did Charlie Kirk's autopsy report say, yes, our official findings is that Charlie Kirk has a fucking magical neck and that's what stopped the bullet? Is that what he said? Is that what the autopsy report says? No. That's what the surgeon said to Charlie Kirk's friend in an off-the-cuff remark. And so all of the Candace Owens sycophants are taking something that somebody said to Charlie Kirk's friend, probably to make them feel better about a horrific event that just happened, and they're trying to put that into evidence as if it's got any weight behind it. Like, do you have any fucking common sense? It's just, you're latching onto an off-the-cuff remark and trying to build a conspiracy case on top of it. And it just makes me think you're fucking stupid, if I'm honest. So to review, these are all the things that you would need to know to begin to calculate whether 30-06 could actually be the cartridge that killed Charlie Kirk. These are the things that you would have to know in order to determine whether that projectile would have been able to hit him in the neck and not exit the body on the other side. And Candace Owens and her supporters have none of this information. So anything that goes from there is just an approximation of an assumption. Even the data that I'm using, as I previously said, are assumptions. If we don't know the length of the barrel, we can't even calculate the muzzle velocity. If we don't know the weight of the bullet, we can't calculate the muzzle energy. If we don't know what type of projectile, we can't predict any type of expected path of the projectile. If we don't know exactly what the projectile hit, we can't make any calculations or assumptions about what the bullet did after it pierced his skin. So all of this is just conjecture for the sake of being able to say something new every day at 2 p.m. or whenever the fuck her podcast is, so that she can get people to tune in and continue to build her audience. And you know what? I'm not against podcasters making money commenting on important political events. Obviously, I think it's important. But this has been going on for months, and we have no more information now than we did then. And so now she's just making shit up. And everybody else has latched onto it and decided that, you know, Candace is somebody to be believed. And it honestly blows my mind. I don't blame the average person for not having an in-depth understanding of ballistics. But I do blame people for not looking up basic information and using some common sense to figure out the gaps and the holes and all the unanswered questions behind this entire situation. That's really all I have to say, to be honest. There's probably a lot more that I could add, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing what all of you have to say. There may be some things that I didn't cover that you'd like to see covered, and I can certainly do that at a later date. But what I'm not going to do is go shoot a 30-06 bullet into a ballistics gel block and try to reverse engineer my way into proving or disproving this theory because it's a complete waste of time. Unless we have an answer to all of the variables here, there's nothing to test. So that's pretty much it, guys. It's funny because leading up to this, I was trying to think about what to cover and what not to, and there was a million other things that I thought about that I probably forgot to mention. But in any case, I'm not a podcaster. I'm a manufacturer. I make shit. I don't get to just make up opinions and sell that to an audience. So I have a lot of work to do, and I certainly hope that this at least provided people a baseline of information to think for themselves and to question what other people are telling them and to form their own opinion. That's really it. Again, this was not to prove or disprove that a 30-06 was used. This is to prove that Candace Owens has no fucking idea what she's talking about. And it's pretty sad to see the state of affairs on the political right in the podcast and journalism world, because I think this has been an enormous waste of time. It's caused an enormous amount of political division. We would all like to know what happened, but none of these people are adding anything of value to the conversation. And so at some point you just have to walk away. And I have felt like that for a while, probably since about 2 weeks after the shooting occurred, and it doesn't really seem like anything's changing. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to send a DM or post in the comments section. And we'll do this again sometime.